Well, hello everyone again. I am excited to introduce the next panel. I feel as though it's going to be one of the most interesting conversations that we've had today, and one that I think is very necessary. I know I'm definitely looking forward to understanding more about this. So today we are going to be talking about hyperandrogenism, and it's virtually split the athletic universe down the middle. Being in this city, you really can't stay away from that controversy either, as India's best sprinter Dutee Chand hails from Odisha and was in the middle of this crisis. Today we bring you one of the most incredible panels, and I'm so excited to welcome my fellow Aussie, Madeline Pape, an Olympic middle distance runner, as well as Asian Games silver medalist Santi Soundarajan. I hope I'm pronouncing all these names correctly, by the way. As well as Gopi Shankar, who understands this issue better than most people. So if I can welcome you guys up to the stage. This interview panel discussion is going to be moderated by Suprita Das, sports journalist and author. So welcome everyone, and I know I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having us here. And congratulations on first edition of the Sports Lit Fest. Like everybody else, we do hope this becomes a bigger festival from next year on. And thank you for all of you who've stayed on for the last session of the day. This certainly is one of the most tough debates in world sport at the moment, and a very complex one at that. So before we get on to our panelists, just a quick two-liner on what we're really going to talk about, hyperandrogenism, so that everyone in the room follows what we're talking about. It's basically a medical condition which is characterized by higher levels of androgens, which is male hormones such as testosterone, which is found in the body of women. And the big debate really is then, should women athletes who have higher levels of testosterone, should they be allowed to participate in competitions that are meant for women, and really how much of an advantage does it give, if it does at all, to women compared to women who have normal levels of testosterone in their bodies. Is that correct, Madeline? Yeah, okay. A little bit about Madeline. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her research involves studying about gender, about science and technology studies, health and medicine, among others. But I'll start by hyperandrogenism and how this sort of became familiar for all of us back in 2009 when Caster Semenya of South Africa, she was only 18 years old at that time, ran this fantastic 800 meters race, dashed off to the gold, stunning timing, and then the authorities suddenly became suspicious of her because she had bettered her previous timing by a good 4 seconds. She underwent what was a gender test. The results of those tests weren't meant to be public, but they got leaked nevertheless. And there was news, there were claims that she was an intersex. That sort of kicked off a huge storm in the track and field world. And it's a fight. It's a fight that people like Shanti have fought. Activists like Gopi have helped her in that fight. And it's a fight that's far from over. But I'll start with Madeline, who actually used to be a middle distance runner, has been an Olympian, in fact, as Stephanie mentioned in her introduction. Madeline, tell me how the journey has been for you, for someone who used to compete, in fact did compete in that same pack of runners like Caster Semenya in 2009. Were you upset that there were runners in the same set of people, in the same set of runners who you thought had advantage over runners like you? From then to now, becoming a sort of a crusader in this movement and being very vocal, talking about hyperandrogenism and how these women should be able to compete and allowed to compete. How did that change? How did that journey happen?
Yeah, thanks. So I competed against Caster Semenya at the World Championships in 2009, where this controversy really erupted. And at the time, I was surrounded by a team and a sport where people were only really talking about this issue in one way, and that was to say that women who had high testosterone should not be allowed to compete. So when I look back at that time, I have a lot of regret, because I realised that I was an athlete at that time who didn't have good role models surrounding me, and didn't have people thinking critically about this topic and encouraging us as athletes to seek out further information. So as a result, I was a very uninformed athlete and I had very uninformed opinions about this topic. So it really wasn't until some years later when I left, when I had finished running and went to the United States to start my graduate studies, that I learned that there was even a debate to be had about this topic. So that was a really big personal and it turns out a very big professional journey for me, because now that's a topic I'm extremely passionate about and have committed my career to in terms of research.
Right. Back home, of course, we've got cases like that of Shanti, Duti Chand, of course, who's right here, who's from Bhubaneswar, Pinky Pramanik, who've all faced similar issues. Shanti had won a silver in the 800 meters at the Asian Games, 2006 Asian Games in Doha. And then it was found out after a gender test, when she wasn't even told that she was being made to undergo a gender test, that she had the characteristics of male in her body and would therefore have to return her medal. She still has the medal, but her name has been removed from a lot of record books. Shanti, do you remember how you found out about this news? Could you tell us about that and how painful it was for you? Yeah, I was asking about the time when you found out. You found out on the news, you said, right? You were home.
Yeah. எனக்கு என்ன ஏஷியன் கேம்ஸ் முடிஞ்சதுக்கப்புறம் என்ன ஒரு ரூமுக்கு கூட்டி போனாங்க. ஸோ கூட்டி போயிட்டு எனக்கு மெடிக்கல் செக் பண்ணுறோம் அப்படின்ட்டு ஒரு 10 டாக்டர் இருப்பாங்க. ஸோ அவங்கெல்லாம் எல்லாமே மேல் டாக்டர்ஸ், ஒரு 2 ஃபீமேல் டாக்டர்ஸ் இருந்தாங்க. ஸோ அவங்கெல்லாம் செக் பண்ணி முடித்ததுக்கப்புறம் என்னை வந்து வீட்டுக்கு அனுப்பிட்டாங்க. ஸோ அந்த வீட்டுக்கு அப்புறம் நான் வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் எனக்கு எங்கள் கவர்மெண்ட், தமிழ்நாடு கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து சிஎம் வந்து அவார்டு கொடுக்குறதா இருந்தது. ஸோ அந்த அவார்டு நான் வாங்குறதுக்காண்டி வெயிட் பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தேன். அன்றைக்கி நைட்டு தான் நான் என்னோடய வீட்டில் டிவியில் பார்த்துட்டு இருந்தேன். என்ன அப்படின்னா, இந்த மாதிரி சாந்திக்கு வந்து மெடலை வந்து திருப்பி வாங்கிட்டோம். என்ன ரீசன் அப்படின்னா, மெடிக்கல் செக்கப்பில் வந்து அவங்க ஃபெயில் ஆகிட்டாங்க. ஸோ அதனால் அந்த மெடலை வந்து வாங்கிட்டோம் அப்படின்னாங்க. ஸோ அது வந்து என்னோடய லைஃப்பில் வந்து பெரிய அளவில் பாதிப்பு ஏற்படுத்துச்சு. ஸோ இதான் நடந்ததுங்க.
She is telling that in Doha, Qatar in 2006 Asian Games, 11 doctors, male doctors who are alien to her gender and nationality, called for sex verification test, and there were like only 2 female doctors, and this 11 doctors, male doctors, asked her to strip off her clothes, and she was nude for more than half a day, where they kind of asked complicated questions which are not necessary, and she was asked about whom she is sexually attracted to, what is her sexual orientation, and back home, so they called her and told that you need to go back to India. But she don't know what does that test means, and like what is sex verification test, and why exactly this is happening to her, and why she needs to go through all this. She didn't understood that. So back home, the Tamil Nadu CM, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu state, has organized an event to honor Shanti, because Shanti is the first Tamil woman to conquer the Asian Games. And also being a Tamil woman, she is also quite popular in Sri Lanka and Singapore, Tamil speaking countries. So thing is that back home CM award function, that time only she came to know there is something called sex verification test, and she failed the sex verification test, and that really gave hard times to her, and she went through a lot, and that was the kind of full stop kept for her sports life.
It was all downhill really for Shanti from that point, because the Athletics Federation of India very clearly told her that, listen, your sports career is over, so you have no point hanging around here. And of course, there was plenty of social stigma attached, and we'll talk about that a little later. how it sort of spills outside the track. But before that, because hyperandrogenism is such a huge debate globally, and in fact, even earlier this year, the International Athletics Federation laid down new rules, qualification rules really for women to be able to compete. We'll have a quick look at a video clipping which features a few top athletes from around the world, and we'll see what they have to say about the issue.
I think they, I do believe that they should be more sensitive towards these things. And I think it's sometimes it's new and people don't know. So of course, when you don't know and you're not informed, then you can be a little bit ignorant. But yes, I do believe that, we should be, not just the IAAF, I think sport and even the media sometimes, because some of the things that they write isn't very nice. And sometimes maybe if we all take a step back and look at it and think, how would we feel if someone said all these things about us? And I think, so across the board, not just the IAAF, I think sport, athletes, the media, we all should collectively be, a little bit more sensitive to all these people, because, you are how God made you. And, we can change, the fashion and the clothes and all the things we wear, but we can't change how God made us. And I think, we need to be more sensitive to other people.
The Caster Semenya case has been very, very difficult. Even as a broadcaster, when I'm in the room and they're preparing for the conversation, it's a really tough one. And it's really hard for me to speak on it because, of course, Caster did nothing wrong, right? Caster is who she is. She loves the sport and she wants to compete. However, I understand the difficulty that the IAAF has in this circumstance because based on what I know, and I'm not speaking on behalf of NBC or anyone, just what my understanding is and what I can see, is that she has an elevated testosterone level, which makes it difficult because if most women are competing at a certain level and she naturally has a higher testosterone, quite naturally that does give her an advantage. So I've always kind of not wanting to speak too much about it because I care about Caster as a human being and people like Caster Semenya. She didn't do anything wrong, but I do hope that the IAAF can find something that's fair for the other athletes out there that are training their butts off to compete, and that's fair for Caster and fair for the other female athletes on the track.
Do we have another video clipping? All right, okay. So there was a mention of sensitivity, obviously, and dealing with the issue. First, Madeline, since you're a scholar now and you're trying to understand the nitty-gritties of it all, at what point do you think it becomes problematic? I mean, the IAAF now says, there's only a permissible limit of, 5 nanomole per liter of blood, and that's permissible. And if it's over, to keep it under those limits, athletes need to be taking chemicals in order to keep their testosterone levels under check. At what level do you think really the higher testosterone levels in women do give them an unfair advantage, if it does at all?
Right, well, that's one of the main questions here, and I just want to take a moment to clarify something that was said in the video that was shown, because a lot of people assume that there is a direct relationship between how much testosterone we have in our bodies when it's naturally occurring and how well we do as an athlete. And that's actually a relationship that has not been scientifically established. So there are a lot of assumptions about the role of testosterone, but not science to back it up. So that's something we really have to keep in mind, that the science is still out as far as this question is concerned. Now, as far as the IAAF's new rules, so this new rule has been brought in. They've nominated a new limit for the amount of testosterone they'll accept in women athletes, but it only applies to certain events, just middle distance events from the 400 through to the mile, and that again is actually not based on their own scientific evidence. They haven't been able to establish, for example, that the 1500 and the mile, that athletes in that event gain any advantage depending on their testosterone levels. So I think it's I just think it's a really important point to keep in mind that the science around this issue is extremely complicated, and we assume that we know what's going on as far as the role of testosterone in our bodies, and that's because we've invested in that idea over a very long period of time. I grew up as an athlete believing that testosterone was extremely decisive, but that comes from our own sort of social ideas and not from the science itself.
But testosterone levels in the body cannot be the only deciding factor, right? You've got to take other factors into consideration, maybe something as simple as genetics. We watch a lot of sport, read about a lot of sport where we know, athletes of African origin, for example, we know that they are genetically stronger, let's say from a little more stronger than athletes from other countries, for instance. So you've got to take those factors also into consideration rather than just testosterone levels. So in a way, the kind of rule that's being set by the sports governing body is flawed.
Correct. I mean, any athlete that you ask, and I've now interviewed a lot of athletes and coaches and team officials for my research, and no one really thinks that testosterone is the only factor that matters to athletic ability. People can name any number of other factors that are important, and they include factors like your access to good sports science. I come from Australia, and our competitive advantage in a sport like track and field is the great sports medicine and sports science that we have access to. So that's something that the Australian government really invests in. So, but we don't measure that. We don't measure what contribution that makes to our athletic ability, right? That's not really politicised. It's left off the table. Whereas testosterone is on the table, but there's nothing to say that these other factors like the kinds of resources we have access to, and also other physiological factors matter as in the same way that testosterone does. And that's the thing. You can never reduce it. You can't reduce athletic ability down to a single factor. And you can't even reduce the differences between men and women down to a single factor. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Why this is also such a raging debate is also because this is human rights violation more than anything else. Gender tests, when they are conducted, the results of these tests are not supposed to be leaked, but they get leaked nevertheless. They aren't conducted in the most sensitive way, like Shanti said, hers was done. We've heard Duti also narrate a similar tale of the way her case was handled very insensitively, and there was no privacy whatsoever when the test was being conducted. It's a violation of human rules. Do you think, and it sort of spills over to people's personal lives. So I was speaking about Shanti, and I wanted to ask her about how her personal life had got affected when this news broke, and she was not able to go out in the streets, speak with people, and even the wedding of her siblings was almost not going to happen because the prospective in-laws were not sure whether they wanted their son married to a house such as Shanti's. If she could just speak about that.
ஸோ எனக்கு இந்த மாதிரி பிரச்சனை வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் என்னால் உண்மையிலே வெளியில் எங்கேயும் போக முடியலை. அது என்னோடய ஃபேமிலி என்னை மட்டும் பாதிக்காமல் என்னை சுற்றி உள்ளவங்களையும் அது பாதிச்சுது. என்னோட அம்மா, அப்பா, தங்கச்சி, தம்பி, அது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் என்னோடய சொந்தக்காரங்க எல்லாருமே இந்த விஷயம் வந்து பாதிச்சுது. எப்படின்னா, நான் வெளியில் போகிறப்போ என்னை வந்து ஒரு மாதிரி நல்லா பேசுகிறவங்க எல்லாம் அதுக்கப்புறம் எனக்கு வந்து ரொம்ப நான் வந்து சீட் பண்ணுறதா சொல்லி என்னை அவமானப்படுத்தினாங்க. அது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் என்னோடய தங்கச்சிங்க ஸ்கூல் போகிறப்போ ஒருவேளை அவங்களுக்கு இதே மாதிரி பாதிப்பு இருக்கும் அப்படின்ட்டு அவங்களையும் அவமானப்படுத்தினாங்க. அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு கல்யாணம் பண்ண போகிறப்ப கூட ரொம்ப பெரிய பிரச்சனைகள் வந்தது. ஒருவேளை சாந்தி மாதிரியே அவங்க தங்கச்சியும் இருப்பாங்களோ அப்படின்ட்டு அந்த கல்யாணம் பண்ணிக்கிற வரவங்க கூட யோசிச்சாங்க ஒரு டைமில். ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி பிரச்சனைலாம் இருந்தது. அது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் என்னால் ஒரு டாய்லெட் கூட போக முடியாது. இப்போ இங்கே கூட எனக்கு வந்து பிரச்சனை இருக்குது. ஸோ என்னால் நார்மலாக மூவ் பண்ண முடியாதுங்க. ஸோ அவ்வளோ பிரச்சனைகள் இருக்குது எனக்கு இதில். அதுக்கப்புறம் என்னோடய ஸ்போர்ட்ஸ் கேரியர் கம்ப்ளீட்டாக வந்து ஸ்டாப் ஆயிடுச்சு. என்னால் ஸ்போர்ட்ஸ் ஃபீல்டில் எனக்கு ஒரு நல்ல ஜாப் கிடைக்கல அந்த டைமில். ஸோ இது மாதிரி நிறைய விஷயங்கள் எனக்கு நிறைய வேலைகள் வந்து போயிட்டே இருந்தது. ரொம்ப போராடி 10 வருஷத்துக்கு அப்புறம் தான் அந்த பெங்களூரில் போய்ட்டு கோச்சிங் முடிச்சுட்டு வந்து அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் ஒரு கோச்சை ஜாயின் பண்ணி இப்போ ஒர்க் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கேன். ஸோ ஸோ இந்த மாதிரியெல்லாம் என்னோடய லைஃப்பில் வந்து இது ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு பார்ட்டு தான். இது மாதிரி நிறைய விஷயங்கள் வந்து என்னை பாதிச்சிருக்கு. என்னை மட்டும் இல்லாமல் என்னோடய ஃபேமிலியும் வந்து பாதிச்சிருக்கு.
Yeah. So she's telling, before translating that, I just want to point out, with one pair of borrowed shoes, she won 12 international medals for India. With one pair of borrowed shoes, she won 12 international medals for India. In 2006, after the sex verification test, she was belittled to work as a daily wage, in which she need to go to the wage to work as a daily wage. She in the midnight or kind of in the evening, she goes to the work. She had to crop her hair like a male and cross, like, so that continues. And even to tell that, even in this hall, she cannot use the women's toilet because we live in a world where we love to label things and where we assume that, oh, this is what a woman look like, this is what a man look like, and the very kind of appearance of Shanti is very different in 2006. And after that, because she couldn't walk outside with that appearance because people mocked her, and she couldn't travel in the private bus or anywhere with the identity of women. I was telling you, right, even after she completed her National Institute of diploma, while registering her certificate with the registrar, the registrar was asking the question whether Shanti is, your name is Shanti, but you look like a male, and what kind of reproductive organ you have. So this insensitive people we have, and this is a human rights violation, definitely. And sports, it's not just sports, right? When she was telling that this indirectly affected her sister's wedding. Shanti have 3 sisters, younger sisters. So when international media, including the national media, is telling that this particular girl is not a woman and all that in the channel, then what will happen to their 3 younger siblings is something. So she daily live in that trauma. She goes through that trauma, and she has told a lot, and I couldn't translate a lot because they're very, very gross.
Sure. Like we said, the fight really is far from over, and she continues to live with that trauma even today. But Gopi, there's work that you are doing in order to create awareness and create sensitivity. The media also needs sensitivity. Could you shed a little bit of light on that? What's the kind of lessons? And there is awareness that needs to be created among federation officials and other authorities as well.
See, Shanti's case happened in 2006, prior to casters and prior to 2Ds, and Shanti was in full support for caster and as well as 2D. When Shanti spoke about 2D, like whole of the Tamil Nadu, not only Tamil Nadu, but Tamil speaking countries carried that news in a very, to a wider audience, because Shanti, we feel, most of the people in Tamil Nadu feel she's our pride. And the thing is that media is sometimes, media is a very kind of, what to say, so they are insensitive because of them, their life, a lot of women athletes' life got ruined, and more than 150 plus women were subjected to sex verification test in this past decade alone. And what about those casters, or what about those Shantis, or what about those 2Ds? And so, whereas 2D and caster is running now, and I don't know whether Shanti, I'm sure that Shanti cannot run now, but Shanti should get back her medal. And the media should help in that fight. And to create that sensitivity, it took a lot of time because it was not an easy task, because they were very heteronormative. They, for them, this is what a woman and this is what a man look like. And they were very kind of, even here, many people addressed Shanti as Sir. If I'm coming with, for example, I'm having this spectacles. This spectacles is not a coolers, but it may look like cooler, but it's a power glass with power. So, but people assume it to be a cooler. So like that, people just assume with their own convenience. And media is the voice of the society. And I think the first change should start with media, so that's because this media is educating the policymakers, lawmakers, and everyone. So that's why I feel it's important.
So Gopi highlighted how, since we are in Odisha, I think it's important to mention how the state of Odisha sort of rallied around Duti. She got a lot of support from the state government. She, of course, can compete now and did very well at the Asian Games as well. But Madeline, to you, since you were in South Africa recently as well, it's amazing how the whole of South Africa has supported Caster the way it has. And she is, in some sense, an ambassador for a lot of young women. They look up to her. Tell us a little bit about your experience in South Africa, because it's starkly different here in India.
Right, so a couple of weeks ago I was in South Africa, but I'm actually going to share a story from May when I went to, I was in Botswana for a big international women in sport conference. Happens every 4 years, called the IWG conference. And the organisers there invited Caster Semenya as one of the main speakers because she is so popular in that region. And it was a really incredible experience for me to sit in a room just full to bursting with people, all there wanting to see Caster Semenya, all desperate to get her autograph and hear what she had to say. And such a positive response to this woman. And I thought, wow, what a lost opportunity for our sport. This woman really could be an amazing role model for athletes all over the world. And instead, governing bodies like the IAAF trying to push her out of the sport instead of celebrating her. So I really saw in that moment what could have been for our sport. Hopefully, with any luck, what might still be for our sport. But certainly in other parts of the world, Caster Semenya is a superstar and a really engaging, fascinating speaker, and just such a great example of what a female athlete can achieve in the sport of track and field.
Also, the other thing is there are the new rules that have come in. Do you find it a little odd that the world governing body now thinks that these rules must be, only on women who are running 400 meters up to the mile, and the sprinters are now off the hook? Is that a bit odd?
I mean, it's odd in some ways, but it's not surprising in other ways, because they've basically limited the rule to Caster Semenya's events, which it doesn't make objective sense, but it makes sense when you think about how focused and obsessed they've been with this particular athlete for nearly 10 years now. But I mean, one of the main problems with these rules is that the rules actually contradict their own research. So they tried to find scientific evidence for the relationship between testosterone and how well athletes perform, and they found some events where there was a small, very, very small relationship, but they didn't end up including those events in these rules. Instead, they only included the events that Caster Semenya could compete. Yeah, so I think it's a real shame on our sport.
We will take questions. If there are any, do raise your hands, and we'll resume again. Go ahead. Do introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Devashi Sarangi, and good evening. Welcome to our city, both of you. The way we stand with Duti in our state, we stand with both of you. And my question is something like, instead of waiting for the media or the technical guys or other people, if you do a Me Too kind of a campaign with your strength and with the support of similar kind of people, do you think it will force those people who don't want to see what they don't want to see? Or is that something which you've thought of? Otherwise, can you take this as a cue and ensure that we do have something similar?
That's a question maybe if you could help Shanti understand. Just like there is a hashtag Me Too movement about sexual harassment at the workplace.
தேங்க்யூ. நீங்கள் சொன்ன விஷயம் வந்து மீட்டு விஷயம் வந்து ரொம்ப நல்லா ரீச் ஆகிட்டுருக்கு. பட் என்னென்னா இந்த ஃபீல்டில் வந்து நாங்கள் மீடியாவுக்கெல்லாம் மட்டும் நாங்கள் வெயிட் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கல. அதை தாண்டி உங்களோட சப்போர்ட் எங்களுக்கு தேவைப்படுது. ஒவ்வொரு இந்தியனோட சப்போர்ட்டும் இதில் தேவை எனக்கு. ஏன்னா மீட்டுங்கிறது சிட்டிக்குள்ளே தான் இப்போ தெரிஞ்சிட்ருக்கு. ஒரு கிராமத்தில் வில்லேஜில் எல்லாம் அந்த அளவுக்கு தெரியல. ஸோ இதை தாண்டி இந்தியா கவர்மெண்ட்டு, இந்தியாவோட மக்கள் எல்லாமே சப்போர்ட் பண்ணால் மட்டும்தான் இதை நம்ம இந்த மெடலை திருப்பி வாங்க முடியும்.
I think the Me Too is getting popular in India. The movement is getting its own prominence. But when it comes to sports field, it's different. And in sports, we need each and every Indian support. For us, it's not just about the particular movement, because the movement is prevailing with the elitist groups, but not with the rural population. So rural population of India don't know what is Me Too, and I believe that we need to join hands in this fight. In this to get justice.
Could I add something just quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very quickly. So in response to your great question, South Africa actually, there was a fairly successful grassroots response, and they had a hashtag that was hands off Castor, and was there one that was let Castor run as well, I think, but hands off Castor was a very prominent hashtag during the Olympic Games, and that appeared to put pressure on on the South African Athletics Federation. Yeah.
We too had something called Justice for Shanti in 2014. Because at the time when she didn't had the permanent job, we were like, more than millions of people were like flooding with Justice for Shanti. So that fetched her a permanent job with the State Sports Development Authority of Tamil Nadu now. Yeah. But, still they need to get the medal.
Okay. Question there? Go ahead, Jaspreet.
Here you go.
Or
Hi,
Stephanie. Whichever. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Jaspreet from the Times of India. Recently, I was reading an article written by Dr. Payushani Mitra, who helped Duti fight her case at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. One line in that article that struck me was that Duti once told Payushani that I want to run the way I am born. And it was very clear that the right kind of support is very important in this case especially. So, how do you think, or how do you seek such support and to identify people who can guide you the right way?
Is that a question for Shanti?
Anybody.
Either of you could take the question. The importance and how important is it to have a good support system, like he cited Duti had in her case, to be able to take her case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport?
To tell that, in the case of Tudy, it was in 2014, but the thing is, a person called Dr. Katrina Karkasis, she works in Stanford School of Medicine. You both have shared a lot of shares, right? In a lot of stuff. So she created a Google alert on hyperandrogenism. She informed Payushani about Tudy. Then she guided the entire, she created a strategy out of it, and this is how it went on. In the Tudy's case is different from Shanti's case,
sure.
But the support is important. When Shanti entered Odisha, she saw Tudy's picture on the road. She saw, even the person who served food to us, even the people in Jagannath temple know who is Tudy. Without Odisha, there is no Tudy. because that is the support 2D got from Odisha.
And Shanti didn't get any of that from Tamil Nadu.
No, I mean, I mean, she is getting it, and still they need to kind of, fight back, appeal in the court of arbitration for sports. And the support system is very important. And also it's about, what to say, also how to put it, I mean, in that support system, what to say, it also depends upon the person who is leading the fight, should not politicize the cause or kind of, a lot of issues are there. We will talk about it if you want.
Okay, all right. Stephanie, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question in regards to the media and the perceptions. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on it, because I feel media can make or break someone's career without necessarily knowing all the details and all the insights. Do you feel as though if there was more positive publicity or less negative publicity that would change what's happening? Or do you think, like as you were talking about Caster Semenya, that they're not publicizing the feel-good, inspiring stories, they're more talking about the negativity on a global level? Do you think that that's having a big impact, and what would you like to see happen?
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, so I think that, that the media is heterogeneous, as in there's lots of different organisations and different opinions being put out about this topic, and it also varies regionally. So South Africa, the media there has been very, very supportive of Caster Semenya, but because the IAAF is located in Europe and has many European decision makers on their council, I think it's really important that there is media pressure from organisations outside of South Africa, obviously. And it has been changing, especially in the print media. Not so much television coverage of the Olympic Games, but media coverage, yes. It has become much more sceptical about this topic, much more questioning, much more likely to publish opinion pieces that are supportive of Caster Semenya. There was one in the Times in the UK just last week, for instance. So it is starting to change. What for me was most alarming in the interviews that I've conducted for my research was actually talking to people who were involved in television coverage during the Olympic Games. There is no oversight, there is no expectation that people who are covering the sport of track and field, for instance, have read anything about the topic, and so they're allowed to express their own opinions without any accountability for that. And I think that is really irresponsible, and and especially since there are so many people that tune in to the Olympic Games. So that's every 4 years at least a space where I think there has to be an education effort.
Good evening.
Sorry, Shanti wanted to respond to that,
please,
so we'll
please,
just let her.
Please.
Go ahead.
Shanti wants to tell about, in a particular media, it reported about Tudichan saying that she is not a woman. And immediately Shanti went to the press media and said that, who gave this authority to you? And if you have a daughter, you will, write about her in such manner. It's about media ethics, and, it's also about the sports ethics. Also, some of the officials who are inside the sports body are leaking the information, releasing the information, and there is no ethics in that. We want humanity in that, humane perspective.
Sir, your question.
Yeah, congratulations, Shanti. We are really proud of you. Great effort. So I would like to ask a question to Magdalene and Mr. Gopi. Given the frame of new rules and regulations of IAAF, any suggestions or any measures taken to protect such cases in future at the level of IOC and IAAF?
Could you repeat the last bit once again?
Yeah.
Are you talking about whether the new set of rules can be...
Hyperandrogenism, yeah.
Yes, whether the new set of rules can be taken to the IOC?
Yeah, because to protect such cases in future, any suggestive measures are being taken or suggested to IOC?
On behalf of the IOC?
Yes, to
If
the
there are
IOC,
if
to the
there are
IOC and IAAF.
Okay.
Because such organizations, CIS and people who are working on the research of hyperandrogenism, they should be very clear enough to give a suggestion to the IAAF to take such protective measures for such cases in future.
Are you suggesting those who are researching on
Any suggestions
on the
given
topic?
to them?
Oh.
Any measures given
Researchers
to them?
like Madeline?
Yes.
Whether so I think some of your work, your research, you are using to sort of, you using it as a reference and suggesting to them, isn't it?
Yes, but it is actually quite difficult to get so both the IAAF and the IOC have a medical commission that is designated they're the responsible body for developing these rules. And there's a lot of overlap between the two bodies, so they often make the same decisions and draw on the same experts. And they're not very receptive to opinions that, and also evidence that challenges the research that they're supporting. So I think it's important to recognise actually the infrastructure that is underlying all of this area of regulation. Like the IAAF and the IOC put a lot of money, invest a lot of money into trying to maintain this regime. And they're not opening it up to a proper, open, scientific process. So it's definitely not happening in a way that resembles a truly objective and balanced scientific approach.
And interestingly, like we were discussing earlier, there's not a lot of female representation in these bodies. We're talking about the IAAF and the IOC. There is a women's committee there, but it doesn't have a lot of decision-making powers.
And very recently, UN has condemned it through their statements and they have issued, kind of, now they have formed a committee, SIDA or UN Women, also trying to look into the violations because it's a gross level human rights violation. So it's like the fight is back on the track, but we need to push it from different directions.
Were there any more? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My questions to Madeline. We heard earlier that, even in the video when it was said that, it wasn't Castor's fault. I mean, she was born, she trained, and she turned up to race. But in the aftermath of the race in 2009, a lot of the backlash was targeted at her personally, not just at her federation. And a significant amount of that came from her peers as well. Now, as an 18-year-old who's just coming onto the world scene and, in a sport that is possibly lonely, where your peers are the people you're racing against because you're on the circuit, do you think it could have been handled differently at the time? And could you perhaps speculate on what sort of effect that could have on the psyche of a young athlete in a lonely sport, essentially?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that. I think the IAAF quickly realised as that controversy was unfolding that they had made a major mistake. They copped a lot of criticism from many different quarters, which is what ended up leading to them having to revise their rules. But we saw the damage in Berlin. We saw how vicious people were. We saw how ready people were to say hugely disrespectful and cruel things about Caster Semenya and say it openly and say it to the media, not hold back and not encounter any kind of repercussions for that. So it was that they really set the tone, the IAAF really set the tone in Berlin for the kinds of attitudes that then followed. And I just think it is incredible what Caster Semenya has been able to achieve. And like you said, she was 18 years old at that time, managed to absorb it, managed to stay in the sport and push through the hard years, and now is really reaping the benefits. And I mean, that was also another thing that really upset me actually about the videos that were shown earlier, which is that we say that, oh, the other athletes are training so hard, they're working so hard. Well, Duty Chan and Caster Semenya and Shanti are working really hard as well. And I think that totally gets disrespected in this debate.
Do we have any more questions? I don't think we do. Madeline, one last question I wanted to ask you. This is the kind of debate where there are a lot of people on both sides. You know, there are those who want athletes with high testosterone banned from competition, and then there are those, like Caster, of course, who continues to fight, not just for herself, but for generations that will follow. Is there any sort of a headway, do you think? Can there ever be a resolution to a crisis of this nature?
I think what a lot of people, I think, in the audience have started to point to this, which is the importance of external pressure on the IAAF, and I do think that the political environment, the environment in which we're seeing a lot of changes happening as a result of the efforts of LGBTQI activism, I really think that is starting to push a change in how people generally are thinking about the rights of women with high testosterone and thinking about their place and their role, their right to belong in sport. And I think that is ultimately going to put a lot of pressure on the IAAF, and I think they're going to have to revisit their approach, because they've been trying to exclude women with high testosterone for decades. Their policies continue to fail, and I think it's time that they tried a different strategy and invested all these resources that they have into education instead of trying to dig a deeper hole for themselves.
That's a nice way of putting it, Madeline. Thank you so much.
One last question, please. Sorry.
We had a question?
Sorry to barge in. Yes, I do. Hi.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So my question is to you, Madeline. I just want to ask, you see, Nike recently released an advertisement on Caster Semenya. Do you think advertising has a big role to play? Because, you know, when a brand like Nike pitches in for an athlete, after Nick, you know, the other player who knelt down during the national anthem, do you think advertising has a big role to play? Because there's a lot of credibility attached to them, and people think, yes, if they're saying it, it's sending out a positive message and it should be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. Have people in the room seen that particular ad? It's about Caster Semenya and it's by Nike. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
it's a
I love
really,
it. Yeah,
really great ad. Yeah, so good. But it's such a good question. I mean, what role do these huge sponsors play in this topic? What role can they play? There are precedents for this. I mean, women's fight to get included in sport has often been supported by organisations like Nike. And we saw in the lead up to the 1984 Olympics in LA, for example, that the fight to add the women's marathon for the first time to the Olympic program was strengthened because of the support of Nike. So they really played an important role there in getting that victory for women athletes. So I think they do actually have a very influential position, and it was just really great to see that ad. And I haven't seen it in the US yet, which is where I currently live. But I hope it is something that Nike is going to push broadly and not just to the South African audience, because it's an extremely powerful commercial.
All right, Madeline Pape, Shanti Soundarajan, Gopi Shankar, thank you so much. Yet another question? Okay, we'll make that the very last one. Can we take that? Go ahead.
My question is, in India, somewhat, we don't have gender education. In the rural level, even I am a 19-year-old and my peers do not know about LGBTQIAA. They just know the 4 LGBTQ. If the grassroots level knew more about their own bodies, I think people like the cases like Shanti would not have been as traumatized, or they would know what they are going through. Do you think if India made a step towards reforming education, putting more emphasis on gender education, would it help cases like these? Would it be less traumatizing?
Great point there. And Gopi, would you just want to speak on that? Because there is some level of education and awareness that you all are doing, but she's talking about education at a much more basic level, for young people to create awareness and its importance.
So it's every way. It's not about, you know, I don't want to call it north-south divide, or even it's there in America. So it's about, you know, all these things started, the discussion started after 2013. Before 2013, most of the medias were insensitive. As Madeline said, the print media so far now is very sensitive. I mean, the English and very few Tamil medias are very sensitive towards such cases. And I agree that we need some, you know, basic indigenous materials on this gender and sexuality education, because we teach the children about what is above the skies and what is underneath the earth and everything, but we don't teach them about their own bodies.
Right.
And the case of Shanti or Tudi, or it's something more about, you know, you're a woman and you should be like this. You should have a long hair and wear flowers around it and wear a sari or whatever it is something, you know, because in sports, only women need to undergo sex verification test. I mean, men do underwent, but it only affected women.
Yeah.
So it is more about, you know, not just about gender education, it's about a very kind of the patriarchal sense with every men and women. It is more with the women than the men, I can say that. Because when Castor came, a lot of co-athletes were against her. I mean, so anyway.
Yeah. No, but we get the point, and that's a very valid question you raised, and there is, of course, a huge need for education and awareness, not just among the media, but generally amongst all of us. Thank you so much, all of you, for being a part of this, and thank you so much for having this session, actually. Very different from the rest of the sessions we've had earlier in the day, but like I said when I started, this is certainly one of the toughest debates in world sport at the moment, so I'm glad we had a platform to talk about it here at the Lit Fest. Thank you so much. Thank you.